Blossom is a Tennessee Walker who is going to be fitted to a saddle today. So when it comes to fitting any horse to a saddle, you never want to have the pad on first things first. Because what you really want to do is you want to put the saddle on and kind of see what points that it rides hard on the horse, that it might be tight, that it might be a bit too loose, and kind of stuff like that. So don't have a pad on when you are fitting a saddle to a horse. Secondly, a common misconception is that if a saddle is not fitting exactly correct, that is like almost okay, to add a second or third pad. And the biggest reason why we do not want to do this is because say the saddle is a little tight on the withers, right? It's already going to add pressure to that one pad once you get in the saddle. Once you have two pads, it's going to add even more pressure, double the pressure, and it's going to make it 10 times more uncomfortable for the horse. Even though it may just be a little bit off, or doesn't fit exactly how it's supposed to, adding another pad or more padding is only going to increase the amount of pressure you have on the horse. The first saddle we will be testing on Pearl Blossom is a Billy Cook saddle. So once again, notice how we don't have a saddle pad on so that we can come up close and see a lot more where exactly it's tight, it's loose, and all of that good stuff. Coming up close, one thing that I like to do is run my hand all underneath the saddle where it's on him, right? So first off, you'll see right up here, there's definitely enough room. I like to make sure that I can at least fit my hand comfortably underneath the pommel, because if this pushes down on the withers, that can cause severe back issues. Secondly, one thing you will notice is that I go to put my hand right here, and it kind of stops right here. If I were to continue forcing it back, that's great and all, we can get my hand back there. However, it's definitely pretty obvious that right here is a bit tighter than is comfortable for him. And once again, if we were to put a pad on, this pressure from right here would push onto his shoulders. And if we were to, once again, as some people tend to say, put on a second pad, that would make that pressure even more complicated and more uncomfortable for that horse. Next thing you'll notice with this Billy Cook saddle is the round skirt. The skirt actually works pretty well because it doesn't jab into his hip bone. It's not too close to his hip bone, and once we get the saddle pad on, it still won't be too close to his hip bone. And ultimately, that is what we want. If this jabs into his hip bone, you either need a different kind of skirt or a different saddle. For the Billy Cook, the withers, it's great. The shoulders, not so much, but the skirt is also pretty decent. The next saddle we'll be trying on Pearl Blossom is a Rio saddle, and it was custom made for a horse a while back. Doing the same thing we did before, if we come and start rubbing our hand all up underneath it, the shoulder is definitely a lot more nicer to him when it comes down here. However, when it comes up here, you'll notice that the pommel is super far down on the withers. So the instant we were to hop in this saddle, it would push down on his withers and would be quite uncomfortable. Coming back around too, you'll notice that this area right here where the latigo is, pushes up on him quite a bit, and we don't want that because that is also super uncomfortable. Coming back to the skirt, it's also pretty nice. However, you'll notice this part right here is raised up quite a bit. It's not resting relaxed on him, it's raised up, and that will also make him super duper uncomfortable. So this one is definitely a no. The pommel does not look good. The shoulders are great up until you get to right about here or further up here. And then once again, the round skirt doesn't come up on his hips, however, it also does not rest comfortably on his back either. The next saddle we have to try on Pearl Blossom is another Billy Cook saddle. Getting up close with this saddle, you'll notice that the pommel is not pushing down on his withers at all. I can comfortably fit my hand under there, so if I were to hop on him right now, this would not put excess pressure on his withers, which is good. Secondly, I'm able to comfortably put my hand underneath the shoulder area. Which is good because then that's not going to restrict the movement of his shoulders. Coming into the back, you'll notice that the skirt is nice and round, not pushing into his hip bone, and on top of that, the back of it also is resting nice and comfortably on his back. It's not sticking straight up or anything. So all in all, this saddle fits. The shoulder is not restricting shoulder movement. The pommel is not pushing down on the withers, and the back is all decent as well. So this one fits him. To summarize what we learned, when fitting a saddle to a horse, we first want to put the saddle on without a saddle pad. And the reasoning for this is because we can start to put our hand underneath it, rub all throughout it, and kind of see where it might be too tight, too loose, or where it may not exactly fit. Key points to remember is we don't want the pommel running down too low on the withers, because as soon as you hop in that saddle, it's going to push down and make it super uncomfortable. Secondly, when it comes to the shoulder, you don't want it to be too tight, because then it'll start restricting shoulder movement. So in the event the horse starts to move and walk around blade and shoulder bones are going to run into that and cause extreme pain and discomfort, and it may not turn out well for y'all in the end. Secondly, when it comes to the skirt of the saddle, we don't want it to run up into the hip bone, because if it runs up into the hip bone, not only is that going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to cause sores and other stuff that the horse may not exactly find too fun. And finally, we want it to rest comfortably on the back. If a saddle is made for a narrow horse, if you put it on a wider horse like Pearl Blossom, the chances of it not fitting comfortably on his back are high. So you want to make sure that it rests comfortably on his back, and that it's not too relaxed to the point it's pushing on his withers, or too narrow to the fact that it's restricting movement in his front and his hind end. And finally, when it comes to a cinch, once again, this differs when it comes to English. When it comes to the cinch, we want to make sure that it's in an area where when he moves his legs and his shoulders, it's not going to hit the buckle of that cinch and cause some discomfort on that end as well. And finally, a common misconception is that if a saddle doesn't fit quite right, to double up on pads. However, we never want to double up on pads, because if something is already giving a little extra pressure, whether that's on the withers, the shoulders, or whatever, adding a second pad is going to double that pressure and make it that much more uncomfortable for the horse. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in, and we hope to see you again soon.